Quando nós temos aqui na nossa sinagoga um convidado, em geral é feito pequenas palavras introdutórias para trazer o currículo, os feitos. E aqui há um convidado que não é convidado. E ser um convidado não convidado, talvez seja, nos últimos anos, o melhor currículo que nós, da área, podemos colocar. Pois, de alguma maneira, é um currículo já compartilhado em nossa congregação, que é através do trabalho do Rabino Joseph A, Edelheit, que já é um membro dessa nossa casa, da sua casa. Então, Rabino Joseph, por favor, na sua mensagem, na sua prédica, na sua drachá.
I'm told there is a translation put out for you. Understanding the meaning of change is always a matter of perspective. I think about this when I FaceTime my now almost 15-month-old granddaughter, Ruth, who just assumes all telephone calls come with videos. She now kisses and hugs her parents' iPhone. Her 75-year-old Zayda, just an hour and a half ago, gave her Shabbat blessing, and she tried to feed me a cookie. I laugh, I watch her walk, and I realize that this phone is only 15 years old. We have had these phones for only 15 years. My grandchildren's generation assumes this. For us, it's still new. It's still change. I am participating in a Shabbat service from my sanctuary, while our worship is being televised, live streamed in digital platforms. Before the pandemic, very few synagogues offered this as a matter of course. It wasn't a part of their identity. But during the pandemic, congregations around the world were forced to find ways to communicate, to expand access. We asked ourselves during the lockdowns and the quarantines, is digital worship sacred? And in a short time, we understood that this technology was offering us something we could find in our minds and our souls. As we continue to engage now beyond those protocols, we are a community. Will we keep this hybrid experience? Watching and sharing Shabbat on your screens, you do not see the cameras, the people filming, and during the service, they produce what you experience on Facebook and YouTube. And the first time you come back into the sanctuary, this might be a little uncomfortable, because even when change is necessary, it takes time to fully integrate its meaning. Some might still feel resistant to this change, but I can personally attest to the blessing of access to the sacred that defies time and space and saves us from many circumstances when we don't have the ability to share sacred moments. Many of us tonight, and surely watching, they each have their own stories about the last 2 years of funerals, weddings, baby namings, weddings that were made accessible by digital platforms. This is change that has come through technology. Reformed Jews have historically made sure that the world in which we live, work, and share among many cultures is not isolated from our experience of Judaism. We continue to demand of ourselves an ability to adapt, coordinate, and integrate religious values with the changes that have already occurred and are being debated, maybe even still resisted. That is why Reformed Judaism celebrates a living dynamic in each generation. We have always accepted the challenge of change by carefully reviewing our tradition and values. And when changes are made, we remain sensitive to the continued presence of our past, even when we guide each other in learning to understand the meaning of that still uncertain future. Reformed Judaism does not make changes for the purpose of politics or philosophy, but rather to sustain the timeless religious truths we study in our Torah. This Shabbat, as our rabbi has already noted, we begin the fifth and last book of Torah, Devarim, Deuteronomy, a text that teaches us that change has been essential characteristic of the Jewish people for, I don't know, the last 3,000 years. Scholars agree that the scroll of the teaching found in the temple was probably the book of Deuteronomy, created under the direction of King Josiah. Our new Portuguese Plaut modern commentary. Now we can see and learn on our own every single week. This book, in its introduction to Deuteronomy, says, uma radical reforma religioso. In this Plaut, we learn Deuteronomy is a radical religious reform originated in the 7th century before the Common Era. Why am I talking about this book? Because on this Shabbat, this is the first time that Reformed Jews throughout Brazil have an opportunity to study in their language a commentary that will teach you more than a class, certainly more than a sermon. But it will take a while for you to make this a part of your lives. I can remember when Rabbi Gunter Plaut told us in 1981 why it would become so important for the Reform movement to have its own Torah commentary. My then little congregation of 135 households purchased 180 Plaut commentaries. Why? Every family was given one with its membership. Every bar and bat mitzvah got one, and anyone who chose to become a Jew. This belongs in everyone's home, not just in our synagogue. Is the Plaut commentary exaggerating when it says Devarim is a radical reform? Let's consider just two changes we will learn about in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 5, next week's Sidra, is the second set of the Aseret HaDibrot, the second 10 Commandments. And do you know it says, Shemor et HaShabbat. The only difference from Exodus, which says, Zachor et HaShabbat. Remember the Sabbath was not enough, because to remember something is passive. We have to keep it. And so the book of Deuteronomy added, it made a forceful addition. In the next chapter, chapter 6, we find a passage that becomes the foundation of every Jew's personal spiritual vocabulary. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. One single verse. It is the common commitment to monotheism. It is the first prayer we teach our children, and it is the last prayer you say before you die. What follows is the V'ahavta, and what follows that is the symbols. We physically add symbols to monotheism. Talit, tzitzit, and tefillin. Imagine this. They are writing a book in the 7th century, but they know people need the physical symbols to experience monotheism. I agree with the Plaut commentary. The ancient biblical community understood how transformative change is, a dynamic of an always emerging reality of a different Judaism. The significance of studying a modern commentary in Portuguese will take time to be appreciated. Permanent change does not happen immediately. Took 15 years in North America for Reformed Jews to make their Plaut commentary a part of their life. I think Brazilian Jews will do it in less time. As we at ARI celebrate our 80 years, we can now also link our founding rabbi, Henrique Lemle, to Rabbi Gunther Plaut, two refugee German Jews whose Jewish identities were forced to change as each fled Nazi Germany. The Reform Judaism that had inspired them to become rabbis is not the Reform Judaism we practice today. Jewish history always demands that our leaders accept the responsibility like King Josiah. Change is what we create today as the foundation of tomorrow. Let me conclude where I began. The meaning and experience of change depends on our perspective. My granddaughter, her first rabbi is a woman. The cantorial soloist is an Asian American Jewish woman. For Ruth and her friends, this is not change. It is simply their generational reality. Gender has nothing to do with being a Jewish professional. Their generation comes from Jewish homes in which identity issues of gender, orientation, and interfaith are simply all their realities. And the institutions that serve and embrace them know that their realities have not yet been fully integrated. When we teach Ruth and her friends about the mezuzah on the door of their homes, we don't add, today it is tradition, but it used to be a radical reform. No, we simply teach these young children we want them to recognize the mezuzah as a sign of their Jewish home. They don't need any qualifications. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.